All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to watch this today. I'm here with Hailey, and we're going to be talking about her free birth experience, taking really just radical responsibility and ownership for herself and her life. And she's going to share about her free birth experience. Really, we had two intentions in creating this, and that was just to, one, let you know that this is an option. I know when I was pregnant, I had no idea that you could just give birth by yourself at home, which now that I know it's an option, it sounds kind of silly because obviously you can do that. Like, why couldn't you? And but also to let you know that it's possible. Like, we have Hailey here and she's done it, and like, it's an option and you can totally do it if it feels like it would be a good fit for you. And Hailey, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yes, so I am Hailey Dunlap. Hello. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be on here. I'm really excited to tell people about free birth because, yes, like you said, when I first discovered that I was pregnant, I had no idea that was even an option. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, you can do that? So yeah, it does sound silly in hindsight because, well, yeah, women all over the world do it every single day. But
Yeah.
yeah. But it's just, yeah, it's not really, definitely kind of unorthodox outside of the box. It's not something that is necessarily talked about or that you really
Yeah.
hear about. So
Yeah.
yeah. So we're gonna
Awesome.
talk about it.
Yeah. And how old is your daughter now?
She is 4 months now.
4 months.
So
Awesome.
still kind of new. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Very new. And
Yeah.
then what led you to, I guess, how was your pregnancy experience or before pregnancy? Where did this all get started for you?
Okay. So I actually stepped out of my comfort zone and I took a course called The Joy of Embodiment. It was an 18-week course where basically you kind of do a deep dive within yourself and you strip away everything that you have built up and you have used to feel safe, to belong, to remain in good standing with others. And you look at the styles of speech that you use, the shapes that you take, any muscular holding patterns, childhood trauma that maybe has been stored within the body that we're unaware of. Just really getting down to the nitty gritty and the subtleties of the body and what it holds that we may not even be aware of. So it's scary because it's
Yeah.
really raw and vulnerable. And it was a class that I think by the end of it, I don't know, not half, but a decent amount of people had dropped out because it is really hard and painful.
Oh,
You
wow.
bring up a
Yeah.
lot of stuff and it's in front of everybody. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it was definitely outside of my comfort zone.
Was this like a
Um,
in-person class or,
yes.
oh, okay. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And we would just share things. And I'm trying to think of how many of us there were, maybe 12. So it wasn't a
Hmm.
big class, but by the end of it, I think we had 7 or so.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it was just
Well,
hard and not everybody's ready for it. And not everybody, yeah,
yeah. And
I don't
like you
know. It's just a
mentioned,
lot.
yeah, like you mentioned, it's like some of the unconscious, like hidden things that you're
Mhm.
bringing up. And if you're not ready to or wanting to deal with that yet, that's
Yeah,
hard.
definitely. But I knew that the results that you want are in the work that you're avoiding. And I
Hmm.
had definitely been avoiding working on myself. And then I actually joined the class. It was my friend's mother who taught the class. And so she told me about it because my mom was having a lot of health issues at the time. And so I knew I needed to step it up because there is a big difference between a tragedy and hell. And you can handle a tragedy, by taking responsibility and just being the best that you can be and really holding it together. And so I decided, hey, if me being the oldest sibling, if something does happen to my mom, I'm going to be the one to hold it together. I will be strong. I will be the shoulder that this family can lean on, and just wanted to make sure that the tragedy did not turn into hell. should anything have happened. So yeah, I took this course, and in the course we had one of the classes, we were asked to look within ourselves and to feel what arose, a commitment, a lifelong commitment that you would dedicate your life to. And for me, the word responsibility arose, to take responsibility for my thoughts, words, and deeds, and to live in line with the highest good so that I could tilt the world a little bit more towards goodness. There's a quote from Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's a clinical psychologist. But he says, when you are wise, you know that the problem is not out there. The problem is that you are not all that you can be. And that really hit me, because I've always thought the problem was out there, but it's not. It's in here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I actually discovered that I was pregnant the last week of the course.
Oh, wow.
So I told everybody, and it was definitely really soon to tell everybody, because I know people usually wait to do that because there's a lot that could happen in the beginning. I think I was like 6 weeks and I told everybody, and my teacher was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity for you to really embody your commitment to responsibility.
Yeah.
So what a better way to test it than when that class is fresh in your mind. And
yeah.
But what's interesting is I actually knew the second that I got pregnant, or close to it.
Yeah.
I was very aware, and it was really interesting because something in my brain just sort of clicked, and I realized it worked. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? Oh no. So it wasn't planned, but it was very much a conscious conception, which I thought was really interesting because I had heard about that, but I didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah.
Maybe I still don't, but I was consciously aware of when I got
that
pregnant.
moment.
So that was really interesting. Yeah. Because I was not expecting it to be like that.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that. Like, I knew after we had sex, I was like, yep, I'm pregnant.
Yep. And I remember I even said that. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
And we still waited it out to see, am I going to miss my period? And I knew I was.
Yeah.
I was like, well, let's wait and see, and sure enough, I did. Like the day that I missed it, I took the test. I was like, I already know. And it was positive.
Don't need to do this.
Yeah, this is silly.
Yeah. But that's I like got goosebumps when you're saying like you finished the course and then you got pregnant, and with like your whole commitment to responsibility, like motherhood is like the ultimate
yeah. So it's like, okay, if this is your life commitment, girl, here you go. Yeah. So
how was your pregnancy? Like, was your pregnancy well?
Like I felt like it was pretty easy. I mean, I was super nauseous in the beginning, super tired. I told my family right away, and they were super excited. Everything was awesome. I didn't really know what to do. I just didn't know what options I had. So they were like, oh, well, you're pregnant, so you need to call the OBGYN. And so I did, set up an appointment, went, it was okay. I was doing that thing for a while, going to the appointments, and it just, I don't know, it felt okay. But I didn't know what to expect, so I didn't know. And then one of the guys actually in my embodiment class, his name's Janos, his significant other, Ilona, sent me a podcast from the Freebirth Society, and it was actually the episode where she discussed her free birth. And so I listened to the podcast, and she just talked about how, she got a pool at home, did it with her partner and her mother, and then her partner's parents as well. And they just did it at home, unassisted. And she just talked about it. And I remember I was like what? You can do that? And I ran and told Evan immediately. I was like, dude, like, listen to what she did. That's so badass. She
Yeah.
just delivered her own baby, and I didn't even know you could do that. And so from the moment I heard that you could do that, I was so interested,
Yeah.
because I remember I went to one of my appointments was to go to the hospital. I can't remember how many weeks I was. I know it was definitely in the first or second trimester, but you got to tour the birthing facility and kind of see okay, this is what you're going to
Yeah.
experience, whatever. And they told me no water birth was allowed. And they said that they didn't do delayed cord clamping, and that I could not keep my placenta because it was considered, I want to say, like biohazardous waste or
Sure.
something. And I was
Yeah.
like, but I grew it.
What?
So like,
Yeah.
I can't keep it, but it's mine.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of weird. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's fine. And so I ended up making a list of things that I didn't want at my birth in the hospital. And I kind of just realized that I didn't want any of it, because I was like, don't clamp the cord, no episiotomy, no, don't break my water, don't do this, no Pitocin. Like, I don't want to be induced.
Yeah.
I don't want an epidural. I don't want anything. I just really would like to do this naturally. And around that time, back up a little bit. So I had
Yeah.
found that website that I had sent you, the Matrona,
Yes.
created by a traditional midwife named Wapio. And there you can read about the
And
holistic
what,
stages of childbirth.
and just for everyone,
Sorry.
was it, how do you spell it again? It was just .com, right?
Yeah, I was going to say
Matrona.com?
Matrona. I believe it was just
Yeah.
like, yeah, the Matrona.com or something like that. Or you can just search Matrona
Yeah.
in your search bar and you should be able to find it. But yeah, I discovered her because I actually found an interview with her on YouTube, and she was talking about, she said something that really stuck with me. She said, what do you tell a woman whose birth you're attending, who has had 8 children already? She said, you don't tell her anything. You sit at her feet and you listen. And I was like, wow, okay. So I just
Yeah.
then listened to her, and I listened to mothers, and I watched tons of videos on YouTube of unassisted free births, because they have those on YouTube. And I couldn't
Yeah.
believe that. I was like, whoa. So I just like watched all these women give birth on their own. And it was nothing like the media at all. It was not scary. These people weren't screaming. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't, I don't know. And I just
Yeah.
had realized that this idea that I had of birth wasn't really birth at all. It was this kind of over dramatized, I don't know, just terrifying thing, I guess. And I realized that, well, actually, you know, birth can be orgasmic. It can be really calm. It can be
Yeah.
anything. And it really just depends on the person, because you have the birth that you need to make you into the mother that you need to be.
Yes.
So whatever that
Yes. I
means.
love that so much. Oh my God.
Thanks. I heard that somewhere and I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
That's so true.
yeah. And so from that point on, I was just kind of, I had it in my head, like, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own. And my little plan was, okay, when I go into labor, I'm just going to stay as long as I can and try to accidentally have a home birth. And then I'll
Yeah.
just be like, oh, oops, we waited too long.
Shoot. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, because I wasn't sure if I could get Evan on board. We ended
What were
up
his thoughts
watching
about it? Like, was he
at
really apprehensive at
first.
first?
Yes. Yeah. His
Yeah.
mother is a nurse though. So,
Okay.
and like she's had 4 kids. And so she was just like, yeah, you know, you go to the hospital, you do the thing, and yeah, that's kind of what everybody thought or whatever.
Yeah.
And we ended up watching a documentary called The Business of Being Born. And
Such a
it's on
good one.
YouTube, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, it was so interesting. But yeah, when it just talked about the two common cascade of interventions that can take place in birth,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of freaked me out. And I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was
For
heavy. And
anyone
we
who
watched that
hasn't,
and
I'm sorry, I
sorry,
was
you
gonna
go.
say, for everyone who hasn't seen The Business of Being Born, it really talks about like the hospital model of childbirth and how it is a business, and businesses work to make money, and that's really how the
Yeah.
hospital is. And these interventions we have, like, cascade, they just build up eventually,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately most commonly ending in C-section,
Yep.
and not by choice, which is really unfortunate, taking that
Yeah.
experience away from women. So
Yeah.
if you
We
are
have,
pregnant, watch it for sure.
yes. Oh my gosh. As soon as we got done, I remember Evan was just like, yep, we're doing a home birth. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
I got him on board with that.
Yeah.
So that's good. But yeah, it just showed how profit driven it was and how it's kind of like a restaurant. You know, you want to turn the tables as quickly as possible. Well, they want to turn the beds as quickly as possible, in and out to get, I don't know, so that they have an empty bed so that they
Yeah.
can fill it with somebody else. And there's just, yeah, it does take a lot away from women, I realized, because there'll be things like, oh, failure to progress or whatever, where that's kind of interesting to me because I learned that actually that's a really good thing. Like, you're not in any way a failure. It is your body
Mm-hmm.
recognizing, hey, I'm not in a safe place. Maybe there's a lot of people around. And so it's holding the baby in
Yeah.
subconsciously to protect it because it doesn't feel like this is where I
That it's
can
safe.
release it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just
Yeah.
kind
And
of thought
so
too, sorry, you
go
go,
ahead.
you go.
Oh, I
Okay.
was gonna say, so much of the hospital setting is just not, there's bright lights, lots of
Yeah.
people, lots of noise and commotion. Like, those, all those things signal to us like this is not a safe place right now.
Mm-mm.
Like, it totally strips birthing naturally, where we
Mm-hmm.
need quiet, alone time,
Dark.
darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom had told me about her experience birthing in a hospital, and she had four of us. And for two of us, I believe it was the youngest two, she said that she was strapped down because she kept trying to get up because she didn't want to lay down to give birth. She wanted to kind of squat in a sitting up position, and they wouldn't let her. So they ended up, strapping her down to
Oh
the
my
bed
God.
because I know that just made me so mad when I heard it. I was like, what gives
Yeah.
you the right? Uh,
Yeah.
so hearing that, watching all of this,
Hmm.
just learning as much as I could, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this on my own and take full responsibility for whatever happens. Because I
Hmm.
remember I tried to tell my family about it. I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. They flipped out. They were not having it. I definitely got berated, saying how dangerous it was, how stupid it was. And I didn't even say unassisted. I just said home birth. So
Yeah.
that was kind of wild. I wasn't even so brave to say, hey, I would like to do this completely on my own.
Yeah.
They said things like, oh, what if the baby dies? What if you die? What if all this stuff? And I was just like, then I die and I take responsibility for it. I don't know. I mean, you're not guaranteed to not die in a hospital either. So I mean, it's like
Yeah.
you could die anywhere. You could die on the way to the hospital. You never know.
Yeah. I think that
And
mindset you just mentioned is so important. Like, if you are questioning free birth, you're not guaranteed to live in a hospital. And if something does
no.
go wrong, you can always call an ambulance
Yeah,
or
and that was our
go.
plan. We were like, well,
Hmm.
we could just call, it should be fine. Should be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And I'm young and I wasn't high risk or anything. So we were like, well, there's really no reason to not.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, my family just kept like, they were so worried about, because I had a nuchal cord when I was born. So the cord was wrapped around my neck. And I had realized just that such things as breech, your heart rate dropping, that they're all actually just variations of normal and are totally natural. Like the
Hmm.
nuchal cord, I found out it's actually very wise of the babies because they will end up wrapping it around their neck to prevent cord prolapse so that the cord doesn't
Mm.
come out first, because that is definitely something that would require a
Yeah.
transfer. And so that was one of my fears. But yeah, so I just discovered that the medical system kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, makes a big deal out of normal things for profit. And then you leave the hospital. So my mom left the hospital saying, oh my gosh, thank God we went there, because the cord was wrapped around her neck. She could have died. But really, you're not breathing through your lungs at first when you're born. You're still breathing through the placenta. So as long as you just unwrap the cord and then wait a second, typically it's fine. So
yeah.
birth really is as natural as it gets. And there isn't another species that doubts their ability to give birth like we do. Like, we're so smart. We've outsmarted our own natural instincts and our own.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've like thought about it too much. We just need to, like, birth is so about surrendering and just like allowing the process.
100% trust, 100%. Yeah. You let go of that need for control.
Yeah. So did your family ever, like, did you tell them that you were going to unassisted birth? No. Okay. It just happened. Yeah.
I told them I was going to have a doula, and my friend Alona that I mentioned, who Freebirthed and sent me that podcast, she became a doula after her free birth. So I was like, I'll just have her there. Between the two of us, like, we'll know if something's wrong. Yeah. But so I was still going to my doctor's appointments about halfway through, and I remember I had around 20 weeks, like, we had an ultrasound to figure out the gender, and she was breech. And so they already they already started discussing C-section. And I was like, I'm only 20 weeks. Like, we have another 20 weeks to go before there's even, so that just kind of irked me. I was like, this baby is still turning. There's no reason to plant that seed of fear in a pregnant woman's mind. I remember being kind of upset about that. And then 4 weeks later, they had scheduled me another ultrasound. So I already had 2 done, because I had one, I think it was like 11 weeks or something too, just to, I don't remember what that one was for, just to see, I guess. And one thing that I had researched, and I can send these articles and this information to anybody who is interested, but I found there's a lot of studies done that show that ultrasound is really harmful to the baby, especially babies, because they're not developed yet. So I didn't know that. And I was kind of like, well, it would have been nice to know the risks of everything too. But where I went charged $700 for an ultrasound. So they were really pushing ultrasounds. And I even I told them I didn't want another one. They told me it was imperative that I got another one. I asked if they could write me a referral to go somewhere else that was cheaper. They said no. They said it was important that I do it there. And I said, okay, then I'd like to cancel it. Actually, I would prefer to not do another one. We know where my placenta is located. We know the gender. Like, I don't really see why it's important to have another one. And so I canceled that. They told me to call back to schedule my next appointment, because that was my next appointment. So I had canceled it. So I tried calling, didn't answer. Don't know how. I called all different hours of the day, but it always rang and rang and rang, and then went to voicemail. So I left a number of voicemails at Parkview.
That's so weird.
The hospital around here. Yes. They never got back with me. There was a nurse who had given me her phone number when I think it was the first time we went there, actually. And she said, hey, text me anytime, day or night, if you have any questions or concerns, and I will be here for you. Texted her again. Never heard anything back. And it was definitely a blessing, because I was like, okay, hell yeah, I'm going to do this my way anyways. But at the same time, I was like, if I wasn't planning on doing this my way, you kind of just abandoned this pregnant woman here. And so it had me really mad, because I couldn't believe that.
Or for other women who don't know their options, like, they would have been,
right.
Like you said, like, stranded. That's
Yeah, and I kept calling and I
Heartbreaking.
emailed and everything, and I don't know if they had caller ID. I don't know. Like, it's
Hmm.
like, because I
Yeah.
said, no, I don't want another ultrasound, they were like, oh, no, don't talk to her ever again, or
Yeah,
something.
that's
I
so
don't know.
strange.
Yeah, it was very strange. And I remember talking to Evan about it, and I was like, don't, I don't want to go back. Like, I don't want to, whatever. And he was like,
Hmm.
don't go, and was very supportive. So that was nice.
Yeah,
And I just kind
absolutely.
of, um, before I get too far, two books that were really helpful that kind
Hmm.
of really solidified us doing this. This one, Emergency Childbirth. Um, it's really short. It's a really quick read. It just, point blank tells you, okay, if you're ever in a position where you have to assist a birth as an emergency or whatever, here's what you do. And it really simplified it. And even on the first page here, it says that the most important thing for an assistant to know is that the labor and delivery of a child are normal functions which nature always tends to complete successfully. And so I was like, what? Okay, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then even in the end of the book, if you are unable to read the whole thing, and it's only like 50 pages or something like that, but there's
Hmm.
in the back, there's condensed instructions where if you
Oh,
don't have a
awesome.
chance to read the whole book, you can just jump here and it tells you what to do if there's a shoulder dystocia or if the baby's breech, here's what you should do. And it tells you um, the instances where if something were to occur and it would require a transfer or would
Hmm.
require you to wait for emergency medical attention. So
Yeah.
we were like, okay, this pretty much tells us everything.
Yeah.
So that told us everything about the physical side of birth. And then I read this book. It's called Sacred Birthing, Birthing a New Humanity by Sunny Carl. It goes into the spiritual aspects of birth, and it's flippin' amazing. I recommend it to anybody. Because I had no idea. And it talks about too, like, I don't know, just, oh, here's like, for example, the epidural. Um, to the mother, you're just like, okay, yeah, it numbs your pain. But to the baby, it numbs the baby too. And so then it creates this first sense of abandonment within the baby because the baby can no longer feel the mother and starts to panic. And so it explains just all of the psychological aspects from the baby's perspective as well as the mother's perspective of these things that we kind of see as normal and um,
Yes.
the harms that they cause. And yeah, it was really helpful.
I'm so
Uh,
excited to get that book for myself just because, like, I
it's
love,
so good.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
love that people are starting to really talk about the like emotional and the kind of spiritual aspects of pregnancy and childbirth because
Yeah.
it's so important. And birth is beyond just like this medical event, it's
Yeah.
so much
It's
deeper than
really
that.
a transcendent, transformative, spiritual,
Yeah.
kind of psychedelic experience. Yeah, it's wild.
Yes.
I
It is.
was gonna say something, but I lost my train of thought.
No, but that was perfect. Like it is just like the
Yeah,
most wild, the most
it
primal
is.
thing.
Oh, yeah, I heard this thing. It said, the physiology of birth underpins humanity. And so preserving its sacred nature is imperative. It's crucial to life moving forward as we know it. And
Yeah.
um, one thing that I also, okay, sorry. So yeah.
That's okay.
um, so I guess after I had kind of been shunned
Hmm.
from the medical system, I was just like, okay, so from 24 weeks on, I took all matters into my own hands. And it was definitely scary because
Hmm.
I didn't have that external validation anymore saying, oh, yeah, you're fine. Baby's fine. Everything's fine. Um, so I just educated myself on everything that I could, birth, how to navigate conversations with family members who were maybe disapproving of the way that I wanted to give birth, of just everything. And I let go of fear, because God did not give us a spirit of fear. He gave us a spirit of power and of love and of sound mind. And so I had to very quickly learn to surrender to the unknown. So I just had to trust that everything was fine.
Yeah. How did that process look for you? Like, you know, like we go to the doctor for that
beautiful.
validation. Yeah. Like what?
Hard, ugly, raw.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Seriously
I remember
though.
being
Yeah.
terrified, and I just I prayed so much. I hadn't ever, I don't know. I was like a spiritual person, I guess, but maybe not religious, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like I didn't really pray. Like, I would sit by myself, but I wouldn't ever talk to God or talk to the source. And I got so much closer to God during this whole process, because I was like, okay, God, you're my midwife now. So what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And so I ordered a home birth kit from this place called In His Hands Birthing Supply. And it just came with a bunch of like Chuck's pads and a Perry bottle, tons of like maxi pads and other postpartum things. I can't remember everything that it came with, but there was a good amount of stuff in there, and it came so fast. I think it came like 2 or 3 days after I ordered it. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
I also ordered a number of tinctures that they had on there. They had a shepherd's purse in case of postpartum hemorrhage. They had one called After Ease for birth pains, after birth pains. And then they had one called Angelica Root for delivery of the placenta after the baby was born. And then in the box with all of the birth supplies and these things, there was a packet of paper. It was just green paper. This packet, it told you everything to expect from the onset of labor all the way through the delivery of the placenta. So it was so
awesome.
informative, and it was just this free packet. And it was, I don't know. I'm just telling you that because that's key in the birth story. So then we entered the 3rd trimester, and up until this point, we were looking for a house. I was due, because we lived in a studio apartment. I was due at the end of April. And so this was around February. I think the middle of February, it was rough, and these houses kept selling out from under us. And so we were like, okay, if she comes earlier, you know, because she could come at 36 weeks, then we're looking at even sooner. So we need to kind of make a decision here. So we ended up getting a larger apartment and just staying in the same building that we're in, actually. So that was
nice.
Easy, just moving to a different apartment in the same building. And we also thought too, because we didn't want to spend all that money on a down payment on a house and then instantly be hit with 6 weeks of maternity leave unpaid. We didn't know how that was going to look. So we got the apartment, and then the next month, boom, pandemic. So I won't share opinions on all of that, but basically being unsure of what hospital protocols and procedures were going to look like, not knowing if maybe Evan would be able to be in the room with me, or if there was a chance they would separate me from my baby. I just knew, okay, my plan needs to work. It has to work. I'm going to Freebirth no matter what. It's going to work. So it kind of fell as a blessing, because quarantine hit at the end of March and I was due at the end of April. So we stayed home and just cleaned and nested, and it was really awesome. And we prepared the whole house for the baby. And then we actually got a paid leave from our job for quarantine. So that was super nice too.
Yeah.
And during that time, I ended up purchasing the Freebirth Society Complete Guide to Freebirth course. And I know that there was some stuff that went down with the Freebirth Society, and I can't really speak to that. My doula, Alona, her name, I believe on Instagram is yogini.sunheart or something like that. But she did make 2 videos where she spoke about her experience with Freebirth Society, and it very well spoken, and kind of goes into details about the stuff that was going on. I was never a member of the society, so I don't really know, but I know, yeah, some unfortunate things did happen, and she kind of speaks on it there. So I watched all the modules in the course, and it was a really, really well done course. And the kind of not frustrating, but kind of silly thing, after I watched all of it, I was kind of like, why did I even buy this? Because it was so instinctual. Like, it just basically explained, you know, yeah, women have done this since the dawn of man. Here's all these things that we say that are necessary, like different tests, or I don't know, just different things that we don't actually need. And they say that they're necessary. And so it goes into kind of the studies behind all of those and how they're all kind of profit driven as well. So that was nice. I watched all that and then realized, oh my gosh, I don't need anything except me. Great.
Yeah.
And then I finished reading my books and just kind of prepared for birth in every way that we possibly could. And then after that, we were allowed to work from home, which was awesome.
Nice.
Because I had the worst sciatic nerve pain from her, and I could barely walk. So it was really nice not having to go to work. Yeah. And then I remember my due date came and it passed. She was due on Earth Day, April 22nd, which was perfect because we did name our daughter Freya after the Norse goddess of springtime. And so we were like, oh, that's perfect. It was the only name we agreed on, actually. That's really hard to do, pick names.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So my due date was on a Wednesday. And then that night around 2 a.m., so technically Thursday morning, I started having contractions, but they varied in length of time and intensity. So couldn't really keep track of anything, didn't really know what was going on, but it did continue until about 7 a.m. So I told Evan, and we texted our boss, because we work together in the same department and have the same boss, actually. So that was easy. We were just like, hey, think the time is here. So he was like, okay, good luck, you know, whatever. And then around 7:30, they completely stopped. And so I texted my boss and I was like, hey, sorry, I think it was a false alarm. So we're going to wait out today and see how it goes. And if nothing happens, we'll be at work tomorrow. And he was like, okay. And then I remember I was worried because there are people who carry 43, 44 weeks on average so I was like really afraid of being one of those people who gestates my babies for a very long time, because I was afraid that if that happened, then family would really be pushing like, hey, you know, your due date was a month ago. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So I was just praying like, oh, please let me go into labor soon so I don't have to try to navigate that. And then around 3 a.m. that night, so Thursday night, Friday morning, I started having contractions again. And it was kind of like the night before. They were very sporadic, varying in degrees of intensity, and just kind of all over the place. And so this lasted through the night again. So we were like, hey, maybe today's the day. Texted our boss, did the same thing. We had the feeling like it really was the day. So we got up early and we went to the grocery store and got tons of fruits and vegetables and just anything that we would need for the week or so to come. That way we didn't have to go back. We went about our day relatively normal. And so we went to the store, we, you know, cleaned, just did all this stuff, made a huge fruit salad, and just did everything that we could. I remember we got the birth space set up. We were really nervous about doing this in an apartment because there's other tenants around that could hear. So we were nervous about that. So I have this room. It's kind of in between our bathroom and our bedroom. It connects. It's like a little closet thing, but it's still a room. So we made that into like the birth den and just put blankets and pillows and candles. And I made a stack of index cards of birth affirmations that I didn't use once, of course.
Yeah.
But they were there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we rode the contractions, and then around 5 p.m., I believe, it's all kind of a blur.
Yeah.
But I believe it was around 5 or 6, my water broke. And so that was interesting because it felt like a water balloon was like popping, and then all of a sudden it was just water. And so that, I remember that really freaked Evan out because he was like, oh man, this is real. There's no way out but through. We got to do this now. So we filled up the bathtub because I really wanted a water birth. So we filled it up and got ready. And then, hold on, let me check my notes just to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember I tried to get in the bathtub, but I really hated it because I just didn't have enough room. And then Evan couldn't really get behind me to put pressure on my lower back. Because I think I had back labor. I don't actually know, but it just like, it was all in my back. So every contraction, I was like, hey, I need you to push on my back. And I would we got a routine down. I would just tell him like, hey, babe, I'm having another contraction. And he would come over and he was so sweet. He was like whispering in my ear to surrender. He's like, just surrender. You've got this. And it was so loving and beautiful and wonderful. And it was really intimate. And I remember one of the things that Wapio said was, what gets the baby in, gets the baby out. So it's all love. It's this really intimate experience. And that green packet of paper that I got for free from the birth supplies was literally the only tool that we used for the birth. Because the whole time we were just like checking it. Okay, this is where we're at. And it was so detailed. It even said, okay, if the mother is feeling this, that's where you're at in labor.
Yeah.
It
was
really
awesome for Evan to have that.
Yes.
Like, I know like something I always include, it's like something similar, I think, for my clients is like a guide for partners. Like, hey, if she's saying or feeling this, like this is exactly where you're at. Because men so often just stand there like scared because they don't know.
And then they feel bad too because they're like, you're going through this and I'm watching, or you know. Another thing I need to say too is I did purchase your birth course. So so you reached out to me too, like right before my due date, because it was when I was working from home that I got it. So it was literally right before I gave birth that I got your course, and I watched it and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so ready now. So yes, all of you watching this, she has a birth course and it's awesome and wonderful and beautifully done. And good for you for making that for real.
Thank you.
Yes.
And as I think like education, like just knowing the process and what's happening, like is so important.
So important.
So important.
And and like just watching other women give birth online. And a lot of them made it look so easy. I was like, what? No way. It was awesome. So it definitely, all of the education definitely gave me the confidence that I needed to do this. And so I remember, I was going to say, we were in the bathtub and I hated it. So I got out and then went to the little birth den, and I just had like a yoga mat on the floor, and we sat there for a while. And I think that was active labor at that point because it started really picking up and it was really intense. And from there, we went to the bed because I went to sit on the bed where I believe I was in transition because it was so intense, just back to back to back contractions. And I remember it was so difficult to surrender. Evan said I handled it so well, but I remember in my head, it did
Mm-hmm.
not feel like that at all. Because as soon as I let go and released, it felt fine.
Yeah.
But doing that was so much easier said than done. Like, I remember I
Mm-hmm.
was so tense and like my whole body tightened up, and Evan kept saying, he's like, you got to surrender, just surrender, you're fine. And I was like, I know, I just can't do it. I can't
Yeah.
surrender. It was so intense.
And it's kind of scary because it's like, shoot, once I surrender, then I have a baby.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of like a mental game. It's like, am I ready
Yeah,
for this right now? Do I really want to do this?
definitely. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so I tried really hard. And then I remember from transition, we were on the bed and I felt the urge to bear down. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, let's go to the bathtub again, because I really want a water birth. Went in there, was in there for one contraction, and I stood up and I was like, hell no, I hate this. We're not doing this. So I ended up on my bedroom floor. I was gripping the edge of my bed. So I had
Mm-hmm.
one leg up in a squatting position, and then my other knee was on the floor. And I stayed there for for the remainder of the time. And I remember it was so weird because I thought I would feel an urge to push, and I did, but I didn't really have any control over it. Like, my body just began pushing, kind of like, it kind of felt like when you start to dry heave and you don't have control over it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like that, but opposite.
Yeah.
And so my body just kept pushing, and I was like, okay, yep, something's happening.
Yeah.
And I know I pushed for an hour and a half, but it did not feel that long at all. Probably
Mm-hmm.
felt like 15 minutes, because by this point, the oxytocin was so strong, and we both said that we felt like we were on acid or something, because it was just so wild. And I remember I felt like I was tripping, and lights were just so bright, and my pupils were dilated. I remember that because I saw them in the mirror, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, I didn't know that
Yeah.
happened. um and yeah, so oh my gosh, it was so wild. So by this point, I am in an altered state of consciousness, not even there.
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, I just kind of kept pushing, and I remembered it, or I realized at one point that it hit me that the reason that she wasn't coming was because I wasn't allowing her to come out, because I was scared for her to leave the safety of my body and to enter the world,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of very real dangers in the world. And and especially with how unsettling everything just kind of felt around the pandemic and around
Yeah.
just what was going on, I really didn't know what kind of a world I was bringing her into. So that was really scary. But so yeah, I just gripped onto the blanket, and um, I remember it was in the pushing stage where I got really afraid, and I didn't let it show, but I remember thinking, we are in over our heads. What in the hell are we thinking? What are we doing? We're just here at home. There's no one here. Oh my gosh, I
Uh-huh.
remember I got so scared, and he said he did too, but neither of us told each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I remember I kept telling him, yep, this is fine. This is fine. Everything's fine. And so he was actually texting Alona at this point, because he kept asking if I wanted her to come. And I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's wait. And because I wanted to free birth. I wanted to do it on
Yeah.
my own, just us two. So I kept telling him to hold off. And then, yeah, he was concerned because it was taking a while, but in my mind it didn't. But so I think we were
Yeah.
about like an hour 15 or so. He was like, do you want me to tell Alona to come? And I remember at that point I was scared. So I was like, yes, tell her to come. And this was around 3 a.m. And bless her heart, she came. And when she got there, she called, because you have to be let into our apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
And so Evan answered. And at that point, he was like, he kept checking to see if she was crowning. And I kept telling him not to look. I was like, don't look, because I don't want to hear if she's not even close. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to be discouraged. But he kept checking. And then I heard, babe, I can see her head. I can see her head. She's crowning. And he got so excited and started crying. And it was so beautiful. I remember I felt down and I could feel the top of her head. And it was so soft and wrinkly. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's here. And so then Alona called and said that she was here. And Evan picked up the phone and he was like crying. He's like, she's crowding. Hold on. We can't. And I think he just threw the phone on the bed. So she probably heard the whole thing. But I remember I didn't celebrate. Like, I wasn't all excited or anything. I was definitely very focused and in the zone.
Yeah.
So I felt her head and I was like, okay, I've got to focus now, because this is the real deal. But it was like, it was interesting too, because as soon as I had realized that I was what was holding her in, she came. Like, oh, okay, I just needed to get past that little block. And then, and so then her head came out pretty quickly, because I was pushing really hard. And because at that point I was like, okay, I'm just going to get her out as quick as possible so that I can see if she's okay, or if she's alive, or if she's not, or whatever happens. Like, I just need to bite the bullet and deal with it. So I bared down and I just like, I remember I was like growling or something, and I just like pushed, and her head came out and then her body came out right away. And I did tear pretty bad. I think it was only 2nd degree, but I thought it felt like it was really bad, because I could feel myself tearing. But I know in hindsight at that point I should have eased up, but I didn't listen to my body and ease up. I pushed through all of that so that I could get her out. So to anybody who wants to try this, listen to your body. Yeah, definitely ease up at the end there, because I mean, and I healed fine and everything, but I just, I remember thinking like, oh, maybe I should have eased up a little bit and not pushed so hard. But yeah, her whole body just like came out, and I don't actually remember her coming out, but Evan was behind me and he had caught her. And I remember I just kind of stepped over the cord and then sat back on the ground, and he handed her to me, and I was holding her, and we were just crying and in pure bliss. And it was so amazing. And I remember the cord was so short, so I couldn't put her on my chest. I had to sit like hunched over with her kind of on my lap. I had a really short cord. That was weird. And then, what happened next? Oh, so at that point I was like, oh my gosh, go get Alona, because she's probably been standing down there forever. So he ran and got her, and then she came up, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, what do we do now? Because I knew that the placenta had to come, but I didn't know how long that would take. I knew it could take hours, it could take minutes. And she had just told me, she said, when you hear, or when you feel, you'll feel the urge to push again, and typically that's when it's time. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, hold on. And I felt the urge to push, and I was on my knees. So I kind of stood up off of the ground a little bit and felt the urge to push, and it just plopped out onto the ground. And I was like, oh, okay. Never mind. That was easy. And then, so by then we just like, she helped me clean her up, and kind of, we just like wrapped her up and got her clothed and put the placenta in a bowl, and Evan held her so that I could go run and take a shower real fast, because I was covered in blood and my poop and her poop, and I'll explain that in a second. But it was messy. So ran and took a shower really fast. I don't even think I did a good job. I think I just like got wet and just like rinsed myself off real fast so I could run out there. And I remember I was bleeding a ton, so that really concerned me. But I didn't know. I just tried to remain in trust with everything and not be concerned, and not, I don't know, just, not really think too much about anything, and just kind of trust. And, So then I sat on the bed and then took her after I took a shower, and so that Evan could go shower real fast. And Alona was like, oh, you should try to feed her. And so I did, and she latched right away and everything was perfect. And then I did think that I was having potentially postpartum hemorrhage. So I took that shepherd's purse tincture, and then it was fine almost immediately after. So I was like, oh, cool. Because the last thing I wanted after this beautiful, blissful, wild birth experience was that, to have to transfer for a hemorrhage. That would have been rough. But yeah, that worked. And then it was really awesome. We just kind of rode the high of the birth for the next week, and we just felt like the most awesome people ever, having delivered her at home. And then I got to shower in my own shower and sleep in my own bed, and the three of us got to lay there together, and it was really beautiful. And I got to eat the food that we had prepared. And it was just really nice. And yes, I'm sure, I don't know. I mean, I just feel like maybe, I just feel like in a hospital setting, it wouldn't have gone that way. But I wasn't afraid at all. There was fear, but I wasn't afraid because my body didn't tell me anything was wrong. And I knew that if something was wrong, it would have. At least I believe it would have. So yeah. And I think it really was, sorry. It was the most natural thing ever. It felt like, I don't know, just akin to like having your period or something. Like you don't tell your body to do that. It just does it on its own. And our bodies are so wise.
Yeah. That reminds me of something. I remember when I was pregnant, I was so scared. Like, how am I going to know I'm having a contraction? Like, what does it feel like? Will I even notice? And it's so much like having your period. Like at first, especially, like it's just that cramping and you're like, oh, and like you just intuitively
you just know.
Yeah. And so much of it is just, your intuition. And I think a little bit of a tangent, but I think our wombs are such intuitive spaces. Like they just know so much.
And I remember hearing that. So when I was an egg in my mother's womb, I was there when she was made in her mother's womb, because we are born with all of our eggs. So I was actually in an egg in my mother's baby body inside of my grandmother. And so that made me realize how trauma is passed through a lineage. And my grandmother had a lot of womb trauma, and so did my mother. And so that was just kind of passed. And so I made the decision, okay, well, it's going to have to be me to break this cycle. So that way, just to break that cycle of trauma. And so I know
I've heard you say that before, but I get goosebumps every time. Like you're just so inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. But just to take that ownership and responsibility to be like, I'm not passing this on to my daughter.
No.
Like this ends with me.
This ends here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know she was within me when I was in my mother. So there's still kind of, but that's why it takes generations to undo trauma. And that's why it's just so important to have that level of awareness of, what happened to my mother, or to look within yourself and find where the ancestral trauma lies. And because I remember in the embodiment course, we had to imagine that we were each of our parents and feel within our bodies where we could find our parents within our bodies. And I found my mother in my womb, and it made me realize that that's where the trauma originated. And so that call to responsibility, it's a lot. But it's just realizing, hey, no one's going to save you. No one's going to help you. If you want to fix yourself for the future of your family and their family and all the generations to come, you have to do it. So
like you have to put in the work. And I think birth is I don't know why, but birth is such a perfect time to take that ownership.
Yes.
And because you're growing this little life and you're bringing it into the world and giving it the best possible start for it and yourself. My dream changes the world, like all with
It
birth, like how
does.
we start.
Yeah. And Alona had told me something that I thought was so interesting. She said that we as women go through the entire cycle of birth and death and rebirth when you give birth, because you are a maiden. So you have you embody the maiden archetype. And then when you give birth, the maiden dies and the mother is born with the birth of your child. And so that's a whole nother process in itself that was difficult, that I wasn't really prepared for, because after giving birth, the maiden had died and the mother was born. But so I felt like, as vulnerable and new as she was, like that's kind of how I was too, because I was trying to navigate being in the world as this new person and mourning the loss of my former self too, because that's gone, completely gone, and you need to move forward from there. And that was a lot to do.
Absolutely. I don't think that's talked about enough, is like that mourning period where you're like, shit, I miss Maiden Taylor, who could do whatever she wanted, and like that level of freedom, and and being able to not be responsible is something that sometimes I'm like, oh, I miss that.
That's a good way to put it.
But then like it does take time to transition into like your mother, where you're like confident within yourself again, like, okay, this is me.
And I could kind of like hung on to this idea of I don't know, I guess like getting myself back after pregnancy, but that's kind of a silly idea, because, well, you never left, you changed. So like there is no getting yourself back. It's learning how to deal with the new person that you are, and how to, like you said, to gain confidence in that, because it's really hard at first, especially having this new human that is 100% dependent on you. And it's a lot.
I agree completely. Awesome. Well, how has like postpartum been for you, real quick, just to like full circle everything?
Good. I feel like I healed really well physically. I did have some postpartum depression. I really thought that I could avoid it, you know, because I birthed on my own and I didn't have any like birth trauma, but I kind of realized that no, that's not really, I don't know. I had to kind of surrender to that too, because we're not really in control of that either. And so it was like physically it was great. Emotionally it was hard. A lot of ups and downs. And I remember I had a lot of anger towards Evan, because I felt like although his life changed, I felt like it didn't change as much. And
I feel you on that.
Things kind of seemed like a competition. Like I would wake up in the morning and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. And he'd be like, yeah, me too. And I'd be like, what? Like, why? I saw you sleeping when I was awake. You're not allowed to be tired. But just kind of realizing, hey, he's allowed to be tired. This is not a competition. You know, you guys are both parents. And and I remember he would make plans and I would get so mad. But then he was like, you can make plans. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I don't want to. Like, I just want to be here at home, and I just want you to want to be here at home too. But no, it's gotten a lot better. And it was a big change at first for us. And we just didn't have our lives that we had before. We did a lot of stuff on a whim, and we're both musicians. So we went to shows and we did shows together, and we just did all this stuff, that realizing that, hey, now if we want to do this stuff, it actually has to be meticulously planned, and we can't really be spontaneous anymore. And but things are going really good. And I feel like I've really come into who I am as a mother, and it's just, so I feel really good about it now.
Awesome. Good. I'm so happy for you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, everyone who hung with us and listened to Hailey's beautiful story, thank you so much. Hailey is on Instagram. You can find her on my thing. I'll tag her. But she's totally an open book. Ask her any of your questions. She's really helpful. Any questions, anything? I've got lots of articles too that I saved if you want.
or the books that
Uh-huh.
I recommended or anything,
Yeah.
yeah, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.